really look at life as if it's a big canvas, and our artist is our Heavenly Father who created us. In John 15, he says, I've told you these things so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. Joy begins to grow when we stop rehearsing the lies and we start rehearsing God's truth. Change often happens slowly, and God is still working when I can't even see it. Joy isn't usually formed in one dramatic moment. It is painted into our lives through daily choices that we make. You're listening to Build It Messy, the podcast for women who are ready to stop waiting until they have it all together and start building the life that's been calling their name. I'm your host, Kimberly A. I'd like to welcome you each week as we have honest conversations about faith, family, forgotten dreams, and the courage it takes to go after what God planted in you long before life got loud. Because here's what I know to be true. The most beautiful things, they don't start clean, they start messy. So let's get into it. Hey there, it's Kimberly A, and welcome to Build It Messy. I am really excited that you're here today. Thanks for coming along for the ride. We're still building, even though it could be messy. I want to keep building. I want to keep building with you. So thanks for showing up. I heard about this art class recently. This famous artist was going to be teaching a class. The class filled up quickly. I mean, even people that wanted to get in that were really good artists that wanted to learn more could not get into the class because space was limited. Have you ever heard that? Space is limited. Anyway, first day of the class, all of the students are in there. They're on the edge of their seat. They have their easels in front of them with canvases on it, their pencils ready to sketch all of their pictures, and all their paintbrushes ready to go, and their paints, everything set, ready to go, waiting for the artist to enter. And she finally did. She walked into the art studio with this beautiful flowing dress on. Her hair was just messy but perfect. She caught eye contact with every single student, asked each one of them questions. And as she flowed around the room, there was this certain just beauty about her as she just walked through all of the aisles, asking each person, each student a question. And she turned around when she got back to the front of the classroom and she said, I'd like for you today, I know it's our first day of class, but I'd love for you to paint what you think is joy. Now, me personally, I would have sat there frozen because I am, first off, wouldn't have been enrolled in the class because I'm not that great of an artist. I am a good student, though. I do have a friend, Hillary, that's a great painter that's taught me a lot. But anyway, she wanted all of the students to paint what they felt like was joy. So you can imagine all of these eager students went to town. Their canvases were full of beautiful paintings, seascapes, landscapes of wildflowers and fields for miles. There were sunrises and sunsets, and there was this one painting of two ladies sitting at a table at an outdoor cafe having coffee, and you could clearly tell by the painting that these ladies were laughing and having the best time. As a matter of fact, one of the ladies' hands was gently touching her coffee cup. The other lady had her hand on her chest, and you could tell she was laughing and she had her head thrown back. And it just looked like pure joy in that painting. Well, the artist, the teacher, decided she was going to grade each one on day one. She was going to do a contest. You know which painting won first place? Guess. The one with the ladies sitting at the table in the outdoor cafe, having coffee, having a conversation, laughing. That's what brought that artist joy. Now, I really look at life as if it's a big canvas, and our artist is our Heavenly Father who created us. He created us to be uniquely and wonderfully made. Wow. Thinking about that, I want to bring him joy, and my joy will be complete. He even says that in John 15. He says, I've told you these things so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. It's not a manufactured joy inside of myself. It's not something that I create. It's not something that I have to grind or grit through. It's something that He wants to put inside of me, His joy, so that my joy then may be complete. But I see that in everyday life where we get so burdened and so bogged down with all of the things, responsibilities that we have in our life that sometimes we just miss the joy. Sometimes we miss those butterflies flying by or the bird that's just landed on the branch outside of the window making a beautiful sound. We're so busy and preoccupied in our minds that we don't stop to really notice what is joy. So if you had to paint joy right now, what would you paint? I just love that picture of those two ladies. I can picture it in my head. Two ladies talking because being together, being in community is what gives us joy because it takes away the feeling of loneliness and the feeling of isolation. So, whatever we want to think about what brings us joy, we also want to think about what waters that joy. What is going to water it in our lives? I do believe something that can steal our joy. We want to think about those things too in our life. But I would kind of broke it down to think about our mouths often reveal where our hearts have been living. So, where's our heart living? Because out of that is going to spring living water, right? So, we want to think about that. What are the stories that I've been repeating? What are the conversations that I've been having? I think that I thought about it, there's three different conversations that I have to really pay attention to in my own life. Maybe you can resonate with this. I have to think about the conversation that I'm having in my mind. What are the things that I'm rehearsing on a constant basis? Am I complaining in my mind? Am I murmuring in my mind? It says somewhere in Proverbs that a woman being that drippy faucet is not someone that you want to be with. Well, yeah, I can relate to that. I don't want to be that. But what are the conversations in our mind? What am I rehearsing all day? Before I ever speak out loud, it's often what I've been rehearsing in my mind for hours, like things like, oh, my back is up against the wall, or I'm really falling behind. I'm not really good enough to do that. I failed so many times. I'm sure I'm going to fail all over again. And you have to pay attention to what those things are in your mind because they are going to be a conversation that's coming out of your mouth. So you have the conversation in your mind that you're rehearsing on a daily basis. So let's stop there for a second. I want you to think about Philippians 4:8. Paul wrote in Philippians 4:8 to be intentional about the things that are true, that are honorable, the things that are pure and lovely, things that are praiseworthy. Joy begins to grow when we stop rehearsing the lies and we start rehearsing God's truth. So let's flip all that stuff. Let's flip everything that you have going on in your mind that may not be as positive or as scripture based. And let's start rehearsing things that are focused on the true, honorable, the pure, the lovely. Paul says things that are praiseworthy. So Paul says that's where joy begins. So let's focus on those things. So the conversation in our mind needs to be focused on those things. Then we have a conversation that's coming out of our mouth. So, how many times have you been around people where it's just all negative all the time? It gets to be very draining. But you have to remember that whatever's coming out of someone's mouths, ours included, is what we've been rehearsing and what's in our heart, because what's in our heart is going to spew out of our mouths. And that's also going to determine our actions. Every day, we're speaking life or discouragement over our marriages, over our children, over our work that we're doing, over our businesses, over our coworkers. We're always speaking life or discouragement. Really stop and think about that. What do you want to be doing? Do you want to be speaking life into people or do you want to be speaking discouragement? I want to give you a couple of practical examples. These are some things that I've had to flip that I wanted to share with you. Instead of saying everything is falling apart, I flip it and I say, you know what? This season is difficult, but God has been faithful before. And then I start recalling things in my mind of times that I felt like things were really difficult and where God was so faithful to come through. He was faithful time and time again. So instead of saying, I'm just overwhelmed, how many times do you hear that? Or I'm just so busy. Instead of saying that, why don't you try this? Well, you know what? Today just feels heavy. So I'm just going to ask God for strength that I don't have. How about that? You just flipped it. You flipped what your mouth is saying, and therefore you're flipping the actions that your feet are going to take. Instead of saying nothing ever changes, try saying this. You know what? Change often happens slowly. And one thing you can always be dependent upon, one thing you can know for sure is that there will always be change. But instead of saying nothing ever changes, why don't we say change often happens slowly and God is still working when I can't even see it? Wow, that is so good. That might sound a bit cliche or a bit like I'm coming across being putting things in denial. That's not really what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm anchoring things in God's character on a daily basis. I'm putting those things into practice. I'm painting my picture right now. There are famous artists out there that just do one stroke of paint and their art may sell for millions, but for the most part, a good painting has one more stroke on it. And the third conversation I'd like to challenge you with is the conversation that you're having with God. So often we're going to other people and we're talking about our mishaps or we're talking about things that are going on. And instead of bringing those to the Lord, all He wants to do is just listen. He wants for you to come to Him and give your weaknesses and pray to Him to be your strength. Many of us have become experts at explaining our problems to friends instead of spending that time in, with the Lord, just giving our burdens to Him. I want to say, sometimes I'll say, Lord, I don't know how to handle this going forward. But instead, I've learned to say, you know what, Lord, you're already there. You've already gone before me. You already know what's going to happen. So just give me the peace of my heart so that my feet will walk where you want me to go. One conversation would produce worry, where the other one is producing the dependence that I have on Him. There was so often in the Psalms where David just completely poured out his heart all the time. He did not pretend that life was easy. And I'm not saying for us to pretend that life is easy, but David, just like David, he poured out all of his fears and he poured them out honestly. But he always ended. If you go and you read Psalms where he is remembering, he brings back to remembrance who God is. Sometimes we just need to call that forward in our lives because it doesn't come because the problem has disappeared. It comes because of how we want to look at it, how we want to let that absorb in our lives. I just really think that it's all about becoming. It's all about becoming. And what are we becoming in our lives? Because what we're becoming in our lives is what we're teaching our children or our grandchildren or our coworkers. When people look at us, I really want people to see a different person. We're not like the world. We're not going to let all of the things become such a big deal. We're going to take it all in and breathe because becoming, in its most profound way, is really like that paintbrush on that canvas. And sometimes it takes more than one stroke to create that masterpiece. And I believe that it takes many intentional strokes over time because, in that same way, joy isn't usually formed in one dramatic moment. It is painted into our lives through daily choices that we make on a daily basis where we're receiving grace. And sometimes we're having to choose the grit to get through it. We're gathering with others, even when it doesn't feel comfortable, we're still gathering with others. Think about that painting of those two women sitting outside in that cafe having coffee. Doesn't that sound great? Laughing, having a great time, being able to let your shoulders rest and you breathe, just gathering with others. living generously in our lives and practicing gratitude. So much joy comes from practicing gratitude. Write that note you haven't written. It doesn't matter if it's been 6 months that somebody did something really great for you. My mom always taught me it's never too late to write that note of gratitude. So write that note of gratitude. Train your children to write notes of gratitude, and you'll see that over time, God is creating something inside of you that beautifully reflects Him. And changes happen, and you'll be able to live a life of rich fullness. You're going to be able to notice those butterflies outside that you need to see, or a beautiful sunset, or a beautiful sunrise. Joy is less of a destination, I think. Over time, I've realized this. It's more about the evidence that God is giving me anew on a daily basis, where I do feel like He is faithfully restoring us on a daily basis. And He's shaping us through each season. Whether you're in your early 20s, I've said this so many times, it doesn't matter what season you're in. God is faithfully restoring you and He's shaping you in every single season, but you have to be willing to let Him grab that paintbrush, make those strokes, help you create a beautiful picture on that empty canvas. Let's think about that. Let's think about the things in our life that bring us joy, the people in our lives that bring us joy. Let's let those people know that. And let's tell ourselves, let's have those conversations with ourselves in our mind. Let's make sure that we're having good conversations with ourselves. We're telling ourselves truth and not lies. We're having great conversations. The things that come out of our mouth are what has been dwelling up inside of us, and we're speaking goodness, we're speaking kindness, we're speaking life, not destruction, into other people. And we're conversing, excuse me, all the time with God, telling Him what our things are, what our worries are, so that He can help us sort it all out. Because all He wants to do is continue to paint that canvas so that our joy will be complete. And it's His joy inside of us. So here we go. Let's go today. Let's go enjoy and let's put that smile on our face and let's be grateful for all that He's blessed us with because He's given us so much. His grace is so amazing, isn't it? I'll see you next week. Hey, if today's episode hit home, I'd love for you to share it with a woman in your life who really needs to hear it. And also leave a review. If this podcast is becoming a part of your journey, it sure means the world to us, and it will help us reach more women who are ready to build. If you're feeling that pull, that quiet voice saying, it's time, I want to invite you to take this next step. There's a link in the show notes to book a 30-minute discovery call with me. Just come as you are. We'll figure out the rest together. So until next time, start messy, stay faithful, and keep building. I'm Kimberly A. This is Build It Messy, and I'll see you next week.